This story is told by Mrs. I, who was at the Traberhof in Rosenheim, 9th of September 1949. The text is translated after a tape recording from the same year. The recording was made at a meeting where Bruno was present, and he asked Mrs. I to tell about her experiences. And this is what she said. I followed with great interest what came out in the media and between people about Bruno Gröning, and no one could comprehend that all these healings that were talked about really happened. Of course, there was first doubt, and you did not know what to believe. It was said that he was coming to Traberhof in Rosenheim. I had not planned to go there, but then it suddenly occurred to me that I had to go to Traberhof. It came from my innermost will. I was a journalist and had just started a new job, and my new boss, a famous film director, was very surprised when I asked for 3 days off after barely a week in a new job. He asked me what it was that I had lost, but he was very nice and gave me leave. I thought I might get use of what I would see and experience at Traberhof in my work. So on September the 8th, 49, I traveled by train to Rosenheim and onwards by bus. Long before Traberhof we came to large crowds, all on their way to Traberhof. There were cars of all kinds, buses, minibuses, people who were walking, cycling, in wheelchairs, stumbling on crutches and canes, people dragging themselves with their last strength, all in the same direction. There was great solidarity on the train. Everyone was going to Traberhof. The bus had to stop because it didn't come any further, and everyone had to continue walking onwards. There were people all the way to the edge of the forest. One had the feeling that all the misery and torment, suffering and worry in the world were gathered there. People sat and lay, some could barely stand, supported by pillows, etc. No one came forward or backwards. You had to stay where you were. Mothers with their sick children in their arms. Horrible. And to think that this was only a fraction of all the suffering in the world, and you could only imagine how many more there were, and about everything that could not be seen behind closed doors. The Bavarian Red Cross was there, and ambulances. He will be here in a few days, it was said. Incredible patience prevailed. No one thought at all about leaving the place. Many had been there 7 to 8 days already, but it was still a good atmosphere. Hope was there all the time. 95% of them sought help. 5% were just curious. There was only one theme: Bruno Gröning's healing abilities. It was new to most people. One did not understand, just waited. During the day it was scorching hot, but cold at night. There were thunderstorms and rain. No one got away, but no one wanted it either. People stood like nails, pillows behind their heads, and people gathered under the few parasols that existed. And now Bruno says, I never intended to do my job in this way. The press and my opponents are responsible for that. And Mrs. I continues, people came by themselves. No one said a bad word. Everyone was just waiting for you. What a misery it was to see. I was happy that I was healthy. People had seizures, epilepsy. It was heartbreaking. I had never thought about how lucky I was before I came to Traberhof. Many sick people had come alone and lay helpless, and I helped them as best I could, helping them to drink, turning them on the bed and other things. Incredible solidarity and trust prevailed between strangers. I've never seen the like before or since. Now I experienced the first real remote healing. People flocked to one place, me too, where there was an old lady on the ground. I think she was a gypsy. She was lying facing the ground for us completely inexplicable cramps in arms and legs. It lasted a long time. She was shaking and kneeling and cried. Her grown son said she had never behaved like that before. People got anxiety instead of awe. I stood there and was silent. She was in the middle of a large circle of people. Suddenly she straightened, with a completely explained expression on her face, came up on to her knees. I just knew that this moment had to be immortalized, and I had with me a camera I had borrowed, and the picture I took is still here today. The circle around her became even closer. Suddenly she got up, slowly, and the son came to help, while he explained to those around him that she could neither stand nor walk, and her legs were crippled. Everyone could see that. She pushed her son aside with great determination, more of an annoying movement, and suddenly she got up. I was standing in the front row, and I could feel that she needed to walk, but there was no room because all of the people. I pushed myself back to make room, and she got some space to walk on, and I photographed. Her son understood nothing, and wanted to help her constantly, but she pushed him away. The people were shaken. She walked and walked and walked. This incident made me think it was my first encounter with a power that one could not see, but that was there. In the evening, Bruno had still not arrived. The next morning the hours passed, but the atmosphere was still good and harmonious. People were untidy. There was no possibility, a chance for personal care, and it was autumn cold. A close assistant comforted and said to people, "He will come in 5 hours." And then, "He will come in another 5 hours." But people were aware that it was not Bruno's fault that he was so late. He was all the time summoned by other help seekers, so people were patient. In the meantime, I had met a young lady in a wheelchair from Austria. Her visa had expired, but she did not care. We went to a small cafe nearby and were allowed to use the toilet. When we got there, we saw a column of cars coming, and in the first car was Bruno standing, flanked by 2 policemen who were to make sure that he was not torn down by the people. He saw us standing there by the road, and he looked seriously at the young lady in the wheelchair. But we could not say hello, we were as frozen. We had waited so long for this moment, and then suddenly it was there. The car with Bruno drove on slowly, and I do not understand how more cars arrived, because there were thousands of people, and they stood close together. We hurried back to Traberhof. People were agitated. There was shouting and talking, and those who had the good fortune to stand near where the car had been driving were happy. They said, "Yes, I touched the car, and I touched Bruno Gröning." It soon became quiet, and a silent expectation arose. Every minute he could come out on the balcony. We did not know then that it would last several hours yet, but it was good that the expectation was there, because the excitement rose and rose for everyone. It was almost unbearable. And then finally, late in the afternoon, he came out. And then came what for me was the greatest experience at Traberhof, even though I experienced so much. The 9th of September 1949, which was later called the Day and Night of the Great Healings, and which was mentioned in all newspapers and media. Relief and joy went through the masses when you finally came out, Mr. Gröning. But you just stood silent and watched the crowd. You looked straight ahead. You looked to one side and then to the other. The people stood below, dead silent. One could really have heard a pin drop to the ground. It's difficult to describe this great moment. You were silent for almost 1 hour. Then you said the first word, "My dear seekers of help." You spoke, and the people, these 30,000, no one moved. What you talked about I do not repeat here. It has been reproduced in all newspapers and media. Finally, you gave the instructions and asked if anyone noticed anything, and everywhere they shouted, "Yes." I myself was unhappy because I didn't notice anything. It was my own fault because I could not keep my attention to myself. I was so preoccupied with others. I didn't feel anything, so I was quite unhappy. Bruno asked who had come with pain, and almost everyone raised their hand. After a few minutes of silence, he asked the same thing, and then only a few raised their hand. Everywhere there was cries and shouting. "Mr. Gröning, my child can move his lame arm. I can see, I am not blind anymore." Everywhere shoutings. You stood silent on the balcony, and it almost seemed as if the shouts did not reach you. There was so much going on, it is indescribable. Screams and cries for healing, excitement. And then suddenly, in this touching hour, something happened that can only happen once. As from one great common mouth, suddenly sounded the hymn, "Great God, we praise you." It was so touching that it's still hard for me to talk about it. I see it in detail as clearly as then, but I have no words to describe it. And as this chorus ascended to heaven, The heavens opened, and if angels had descended, no one would have been surprised. In a sunset of red and gold, while the crowd sang, you, Mr. Gröning, stood on the balcony with your hands in front of your chest, your face facing the sky, and tears ran slowly down your face. Afterward there was silence. Some struggled with tears, others let them flow freely. I have never experienced anything more touching. People were kind of upset, overjoyed, tears flowed. People told again and again what they had had, and now it was gone. They were overjoyed. Someone could suddenly walk, etc. And suddenly it is rumored that the worst cases would be treated directly in the backyard. Immediately the masses moved, and people stormed towards the backyard, where only the heaviest cases were let in. Tears flowed. People told again and again what they had done wrong, and now it was gone. They were overjoyed. Someone could suddenly talk and walk. I was with the lady in the wheelchair and with her assistant. We talked about how we could get her in there. It was completely impossible to get there with a wheelchair. We took a detour around the entire stud and pushed our way forward, and had to cross several obstacles and pillars in several places. First the wheelchair, then the lame one. To this day I can't understand where we took our strength from, but we got into the backyard. But it was not only the sickest there. Many had gotten in illegal. First and foremost, there was a long line of cars, ambulances, trucks, where the very sick were lying, sitting, and everyone was waiting patiently for Bruno. The inner courtyard was blackened by people. Night fell, and some lanterns were lit, and everything was shrouded in an unreal light. Then Bruno came. He was immediately surrounded and had to fight to get from car to car. Afterward there were explained and illuminated faces to be seen everywhere. The power showed itself. Bruno tried to get back, but was immediately surrounded and could not move. He distributed 3 silver paper balls, 2 to the sick and 1 to me. I had a bad conscience because I was not seriously ill. I wanted to give it back, but did not come forward, and kept it. Today it is the most expensive I own. He had to free himself with force because people pulled on him and in his clothes. I wanted to touch him. He had worked night and day. He must be dead tired, I thought. I did not know then that he gained more and more power from healing. He entered the house, and it was night. No one wanted to leave Traberhof. We slept for a couple of hours, and it was morning. Again, it was the same. People stood head to head. There was an atmosphere of liberation. Everyone was talking about what had happened the day before. Bruno had to go somewhere else, but no one wanted to leave Traberhof. The helper, Mr. Kohlmann, did not know when Bruno would return. He asked people to go home, but no one wanted to. The power still radiated on Traberhof. The young lady was sad. Kuhlmann stated that Bruno would send power via remote healing. Suddenly I noticed tingling and pulling in my body for the first time, and I was overjoyed. The same thing happened to the lame young lady. Suddenly she stood upright, tears running down her cheeks, and I saw how life came back into her thin legs that had been completely useless for years. We were both touched. Several had now left, but about 30 help seekers in wheelchairs had become friends and formed a circle with which I joined. None of them had met before they came here, but there was great solidarity between them. We spent the night in the stable and made it homely in a small room there. In Rosenheim it was big business for all the overnight people, and there was only one theme on everyone's lips. It was incomprehensible. I remember a girl who with all her might tried to understand with her head. She had bouts of seizures and nervous breakdowns. I said that I did not want to participate in these conversations, and left. I did not think about my job at all. Everything that happened at Traberhof was the only important thing. Bruno did come back again later, and many heavily burdened were treated. I stayed away to accommodate those who needed it. More and more very sick people came. I had had bile and stomach problems which had disappeared, but I only discovered that later. I was so preoccupied with the others there at Traberhof. I looked through a window and heard glowing stories. Bruno healed a lady who was completely stiff all over. She was as dead. In deep concentration, Bruno, step by step, made her whole body alive. She got up and walked, and without help managed to put on Bruno's jacket. She could move the whole body. I was there for 8 days. Bruno's brother and nephew came and were among us, and we enjoyed it. We waited so long and heard that Bruno Gröning was in Munich. We asked our brother to go there and ask him to come, and he did. He returned in the evening and said that Bruno would come in 3 days. But when Bruno arrived, he could not heal because he had been banned from healing. It was a big disappointment, but 2 days later he could be met in a very secret place that turned out to be a workshop in Rosenheim. Bruno was then constantly flanked by people, and we understood that there were attempts in progress. There were many healings. End.